2, decimal operations and equations with decimals. Essentially what we'll be doing for today is a combination of what we've been doing for the last couple of lessons. Now they're going to incorporate decimals. So we'll see some addition subtraction equations, and we'll see some multiplication division equations, but we'll just have decimals in there instead. So it's really not that much different, but you know how you tend to get with decimals running high. So you see like this. See problems like this, first of all. And these would qualify as like decimal operations. This isn't necessarily an equation. Well, what they want to do is they want to acquaint you, first of all, with the basics of adding and subtracting, again, with decimals, and then they'll incorporate them into equations. So we'll take the first part today. We'll take the decimal operations today, and then we'll get into the equations tomorrow, okay? So if we're starting at, you can still think in terms of your number line. The concept itself does not change. So if we think that we are at a negative 1.3, okay, as our starting point, adding a negative is going to mean we're going to go which direction, left or right? And we add a negative. Your other right, yes, this way. So essentially, if you just had a negative 1 and you subtracted 4, you went 4 places that way, where would you be? Just look at the whole numbers first. Negative 5. Again, now you'll just add on the decimal portions. The 0.3 plus the 0.2 will put you at a negative 5.5. So almost like you're adding the two values together because they're both going in the same, you're going in that same direction as far as on the negative side. Yeah? When we multiply. Okay. But this works different. This key is when you know you're adding, you're moving that way. When you know you're subtracting, you move that way from your starting point. Okay? So let's take a look at one and see how we do. It helps to look at it and just maybe even estimate first to find out where you're going, and then do your best from there. 10 and 57 hundredths plus a negative 6 and 89 hundredths. Okay, so let's figure out, first of all, what we're doing. Adding the negative is really what? So really all we're doing is this. If you were to see this, you probably could have seen a problem like this in 5th grade. So all we did was figure that when we added the negative, which is also something else, and a lot of these things are just concepts piggybacked on other concepts. That's all it is. But nonetheless, concepts that you know. So when I add and subtract with decimals, I need to make sure to do what? Key. Line them up. So 17, 14, 6, we should have 3 and 68 hundredths. Okay? Yeah. Your turn. Okay, so when rewind. If when I add a negative, right? You're seeing this? When I add a negative, what did it really mean I was doing? Sophia? So when I subtract a negative, it must really mean I'm doing what? Adding. Line them up. Do I need a 0 there? I mean, I'll just put one there if I want. 7, 10, 9 plus 4 is 13, and 11. Okay, so the concepts themselves are pretty much the same. No, they're not really that tricky. It's just a quick review. But you'll also see some multiplication. Do we line up the decimals when we multiply? No. So 3.1, it just so happens that the decimals line up. We didn't do that on purpose. You don't line up the decimals. 8, you don't go out of your way to line up the decimals, put it that way. Drop the 0, the 6, the 18, 8, 10, 11, 2. Now, how many decimals? So therefore, 21.08 negative, right? There's the positive and negative. You betcha. Sure you can. Any questions, Kennedy? Are you familiar with this style? Or did you do that lattice stuff? Did you do that one that looks like a Sudoku? Like a Punnett square? So here, essentially what we do is we start with the furthest one to the right on the bottom. So we go 1 times 8. That's how we got the 8. 8 times 3. That's how we got the 24. Then, Kennedy, I move over and focus on the 6. But since I moved over one spot, I put a 0 to move over one spot underneath. So then the 6 times 1 gives us the 6. The 3 times the 6 gives us the 18. Add them together, 8, 10. The rest is history. I'll be happy to show you when we have some time if you want. This one with the numbers, the Sudoku. All right, there it is. There's your division with decimals. So remember, math makes a lot of sense. I mean, it really does. When you multiply, you take care of the decimal at the end. If division's the opposite of multiplication, when would you take care of the decimal in division? Beginning. Yeah, so the negative 0.7 would go on the outside. The negative 11.41 on the inside. The negative signs themselves won't influence any of the multiplication. It just influences your quotient, influences your answer. So rule number 1 is I have to make sure that I'm dividing by a whole number. Good. And how am I going to do that? One place. How many places do I move on the inside? One, because I move it the same amount. Go from there. Okay. There's my new decimal. Now I just divide and everything takes care of itself as long as I make sure that I put the numbers where they're supposed to go. 7 goes into 11 once. Okay? 7 into 44. 7 into 21.
Oh, I didn't bring down the 1. I brought down the 0. Wait, what's 0? I know. I skipped the 1 and I just put the 0.
We're good?
Yeah. I need one more. I need one more. Just like that. Can we just like an 8? Use an 8. 8 squared.
Page 105. 12 through 23. 12 problems.